As Russia entered the final years before the 1917 revolution, a new and deeply troubling figure emerged at the center of political life: Grigori Rasputin. His influence over the royal family, and especially over Tsarina Alexandra, accelerated the collapse of public confidence in the Romanov dynasty. During this period, Russia witnessed his rise. He was an uneducated peasant from Siberia who claimed to be a holy man and spiritual healer. Although he portrayed himself as a Russian Orthodox monk, the Orthodox Church never officially recognized him. Rasputin cut a striking figure. He was tall and powerfully built, with piercing eyes and a long, wild beard. His crude manners, unkempt appearance, and poor hygiene contrasted sharply with the refinement expected in aristocratic circles. He was also notorious for his drinking, womanizing, and other immoral behavior which generated scandal wherever he went. Yet, despite these flaws, Rasputin possessed a remarkable personal charisma that attracted many followers, particularly among influential women in high society. Most importantly, he gained a reputation for possessing extraordinary healing powers. This belief, whether justified or not, became the key to his rise within the imperial court, and ultimately brought him into the confidence of the royal family. Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra had 4 daughters before finally welcoming a son, Alexei, in July 1904. His birth brought immense joy to the imperial family and to many Russians, as he was the long-awaited heir to the Romanov throne. That happiness, however, was soon overshadowed by anxiety when it became clear that Alexei suffered from hemophilia, a hereditary blood disorder that prevents normal clotting. Because of his condition, even seemingly minor injuries could cause severe internal bleeding, intense pain, and potentially fatal complications. The disease had spread through several European royal families as a result of generations of intermarriage among ruling dynasties, and Alexei became one of its most famous victims. In 1912, he suffered a serious accident that led to extensive internal bleeding, leaving doctors unable to provide effective treatment. As his condition worsened, Alexandra became increasingly desperate. Convinced that medical science could do little for her son, she turned to Rasputin, whose reputation as a holy man and healer had already attracted widespread attention. This decision marked the beginning of Rasputin's extraordinary influence over the imperial family, and ultimately over the Russian government itself. When Alexandra, desperate to save her son, telegraphed Rasputin for help, he responded with a simple message: "Do not let the doctors bother the little one too much. He will recover." Trusting his advice, she ordered the physicians to stop their treatments. Remarkably, within hours, Alexei's condition began to improve, and the bleeding subsided. To Alexandra, the recovery appeared nothing short of miraculous. Modern historians generally suggest that Rasputin may have helped unintentionally by encouraging doctors to discontinue treatments, particularly the use of aspirin, which was then commonly given for pain, but is now known to interfere with blood clotting and worsen bleeding in hemophilia patients. Regardless of the explanation, Alexandra became convinced that Rasputin had saved her son's life. From that moment onward, the Tsarina placed complete faith in him. Rasputin was granted regular access to the imperial family and became one of Alexandra's most trusted advisors. Anyone who criticized him or questioned his influence was dismissed as jealous, hostile, or part of a conspiracy against the royal family. Yet while his standing at court continued to grow, Rasputin's behavior remained deeply controversial. He persisted in a scandal-ridden lifestyle marked by heavy drinking, questionable religious practices, and affairs with aristocratic women. Reports of his conduct spread throughout Russian society, scandalizing the public and further damaging the reputation of the monarchy at a time when confidence in the regime was already rapidly eroding. Nicholas was deeply devoted to his wife and often lacked confidence in his own judgment, allowed Alexandra to play an increasingly prominent role in political affairs. As criticism of Rasputin intensified among government officials, aristocrats, and members of the public, Alexandra became even more determined to defend him. Convinced that he had saved the life of her son and heir, she viewed attacks on Rasputin as attacks on the imperial family itself. As a result, his influence within the Russian court continued to grow despite widespread concern about his behavior and qualifications. By 1914, Rasputin was involved in matters far beyond spiritual guidance. He exerted influence over ministerial appointments, intervened in court politics, involved himself in church affairs, and increasingly offered opinions on military and governmental questions. Many Russians were alarmed that an uneducated peasant with a scandalous reputation appeared to wield such power at the highest levels of government. Rumors, gossip, and conspiracy theories spread throughout the empire, further undermining confidence in the monarchy. Whether Rasputin's actual influence was as extensive as many believed mattered less than the public perception that the government was being manipulated by an irresponsible and disreputable outsider. By the eve of World War I, Rasputin had become a symbol of the corruption, incompetence, and decay that many Russians associated with the imperial system, contributing to the growing crisis of legitimacy facing the Romanov dynasty. When war erupted in 1914, Russia initially entered the conflict with great patriotic enthusiasm, but a series of devastating military defeats in 1914 and 1915 exposed serious weaknesses within the Russian army and government. Faced with mounting setbacks, Nicholas became convinced that he could restore morale and secure victory only by taking personal command of the armed forces. In 1915, he left the capital and assumed direct leadership of the army, a decision that proved disastrous. He possessed little military experience or strategic skill, and by placing himself at the head of the war effort, he ensured that every future defeat would be associated directly with him. His departure from Petrograd left the day-to-day administration of the government largely in the hands of Tsarina Alexandra. Deeply dependent on Rasputin's advice, Alexandra increasingly relied on him when making political decisions. Rasputin used his influence to recommend the dismissal of experienced ministers and their replacement with individuals who were often weak, corrupt, or incompetent. As a result, the government became increasingly unstable as ministers were appointed and removed in rapid succession, preventing any consistent leadership or effective policymaking. Meanwhile, conditions across Russia continued to deteriorate. Corruption spread throughout the government. Food and fuel shortages became more severe, inflation eroded living standards, and public confidence in the regime plummeted. The war effort suffered from poor leadership, inadequate supplies, and enormous casualties, while ordinary Russians endured growing hardship at home. By 1916, many citizens had lost faith not only in the government, but in the monarchy itself. Russia was descending into political, economic, and social chaos, setting the stage for the revolutions that would soon bring an end to the Romanov dynasty. By late 1916, even many members of Russia's aristocracy had concluded that Rasputin's influence posed a grave threat to the survival of the monarchy. Convinced that the imperial family's association with him was destroying public confidence in the regime, a group of nobles led by Prince Felix Yusupov conspired to remove him. The events surrounding Rasputin's death quickly became the subject of legend, blending documented facts with dramatic stories that have captivated historians and the public alike. According to the most famous account, the conspirators lured Rasputin to Yusupov's palace with a false invitation. There, they allegedly served him pastries and wine laced with cyanide, supposedly enough poison to kill several men. When the poison appeared to have no effect, the increasingly desperate Yusupov shot Rasputin at close range, and the wounded mystic collapsed. The story then claims that Rasputin unexpectedly revived, opened his eyes, and attempted to flee, forcing the plotters to shoot him several more times. They then beat him, bound his body, and disposed of it in the icy waters of the Neva River before fleeing the scene. When Rasputin's body was later recovered, reports circulated that water had been found in his lungs and that some of the bindings had worked loose, leading many to believe that he was still alive when he entered the river. Although modern historians continue to debate several aspects of the story, the dramatic tale contributed greatly to Rasputin's legendary reputation. Whatever the exact details, there is no doubt that the assassination reflected the desperation of influential Russians who believed that eliminating Rasputin might save the monarchy. Their hopes proved misplaced. On New Year's Eve 1916, Rasputin was dead, but the government he had come to symbolize was already nearing collapse. Within a few months, revolution would sweep away the Romanov dynasty and bring an end to more than 3 centuries of tsarist rule. Alexandra was devastated by Rasputin's death. She firmly believed that he was the only person capable of protecting her son Alexei, and she regarded him as a divinely guided figure whose advice was essential to the welfare of both the imperial family and Russia itself. In her view, the assassination had removed the one individual who could preserve the monarchy from disaster. Yet Rasputin's murder did nothing to solve the empire's growing problems. Public respect for the Romanov dynasty had already been deeply damaged by years of scandal, incompetence, and military defeat. The government remained unstable and leaderless, with ministers constantly replaced and no coherent direction from the capital. Meanwhile, food shortages worsened, inflation soared, and ordinary Russians struggled to obtain basic necessities. The army, exhausted by staggering casualties and repeated defeats, suffered from declining morale and growing disillusionment. At the same time, the Tsar remained at military headquarters, isolated from the rapidly deteriorating situation in Petrograd and increasingly unaware of the depth of the crisis. By the beginning of 1917, Russia stood on the brink of collapse, with revolution looming just beyond the horizon. In March 1917, February according to the old Russian calendar then still in use, the mounting tensions within Russian society finally erupted into revolution. Massive bread riots broke out in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, as food shortages, inflation, and wartime hardships pushed thousands of workers and ordinary citizens into the streets. What made this uprising different from previous demonstrations was the reaction of the military. Rather than suppressing the crowds, many soldiers refused orders to fire on the protesters and instead joined them. Years of military defeats, poor conditions, and frustration with the government had destroyed the army's loyalty to the tsarist regime. This was the decisive turning point. Throughout history, governments can often survive protests and unrest, but when soldiers mutiny and side with the opposition, revolutions become far more likely to succeed. With the support of the military evaporating and the government unable to restore order, the Romanov regime rapidly collapsed. The March Revolution marked the end of centuries of tsarist authority and set in motion events that would soon force Nicholas to abdicate the throne, bringing the Romanov dynasty to an end.